The champagne still bubbled when I saw them, my husband's hand on my sister's back. They didn't notice me. Not yet. And before I could speak, my mother's words echoed in my head, the truth never hides forever. It waits. So I smiled, raised my glass, and decided to let the night finish its story. The night air outside the ballroom felt colder than it should have been. Texas evenings in early summer don't usually carry that kind of chill, the kind that slides under your skin and stays there. I slipped out through the side door near the catering tables, pretending to take a phone call. No one noticed. No one ever does when you look composed. The balcony wrapped around the hotel's ballroom, lined with fairy lights that flickered like faint heartbeats. Below, the city shimmered, Austin's skyline glowing soft and indifferent, unaware of the quiet war beginning in my chest. I leaned against the railing, the metal biting my palms, and tried to remember how to breathe. Inside, through the glass doors, laughter rose again. Their laughter. I caught the reflection of Mark's hand resting gently on Lila's lower back as they rejoined the party. The touch looked casual to everyone else, but to me, it was a confession. A whisper in plain sight. I didn't cry. I wanted to. But tears felt like a privilege I couldn't afford anymore. Instead, I let my breath slow until every inhale sounded like a promise. I wasn't sure what kind yet, revenge, maybe. Or truth. Or both. A waiter appeared with a tray of champagne. "Ma'am? You all right?" he asked softly. His kindness almost broke me. Almost. "Fine," I said. "Just needed air." He nodded and disappeared, leaving the scent of citrus and alcohol behind him. Through the glass, Mark caught my eye, just for a second. His smile faltered. He knew something was off. He started toward me, but Lila grabbed his arm, said something in his ear, and he stopped. He looked back at her the way men do when they've already chosen. That's when I realized he wasn't just unfaithful, he was comfortable with it. I looked down at the diamond bracelet on my wrist, his last anniversary gift. He'd said, "You deserve something timeless." I wondered then if he meant the jewelry or the betrayal. I unclasped it quietly, felt its weight fall into my palm, and dropped it into the half-empty flute of champagne on the railing. The sound it made was small, almost polite, like closure pretending to be an accident. Behind me, the glass doors slid open. His voice came, low, practiced. "Clara?" I didn't turn. "Enjoying yourself?" I asked, keeping my tone light. He hesitated. "You disappeared." "I tend to do that," I said. "When things get crowded." He stepped closer. I could smell his cologne, warm and familiar, now sickly sweet. "You okay?" I finally turned. "Am I?" I tilted my head, studying him. "You tell me." He frowned, confused, calculating how much I'd seen. I watched the way his throat tightened when he realized I wasn't going to make it easy. "You're overthinking again," he said gently, the same tone he used whenever he wanted me to back down. "I used to," I whispered. "Not tonight." His jaw shifted, just slightly. That small betrayal of confidence told me everything. He reached out, brushing my arm, and I stepped back. "Go inside, Mark," I said quietly. "The night's not over yet." He opened his mouth to argue, but something in my eyes must have warned him. He left without another word. When the doors closed, I turned back to the city. The wind picked up, catching the hem of my dress and the faint echo of violins from inside. I closed my eyes and made myself a silent promise. I wouldn't break. I'd build. And when the truth finally walked into the light, I'd be standing there, calm, ready, because the best part wasn't the betrayal. It was what came after. The night air outside the ballroom felt colder than it should have been. Texas evenings in early summer don't usually carry that kind of chill, the kind that slides under your skin and stays there. I slipped out through the side door near the catering tables, pretending to take a phone call. No one noticed. No one ever does when you look composed. The balcony wrapped around the hotel's ballroom, lined with fairy lights that flickered like faint heartbeats. Below, the city shimmered, Austin's skyline glowing soft and indifferent, unaware of the quiet war beginning in my chest. I leaned against the railing, the metal biting my palms, and tried to remember how to breathe. Inside, through the glass doors, laughter rose again. Their laughter. I caught the reflection of Mark's hand resting gently on Lila's lower back as they rejoined the party. The touch looked casual to everyone else, but to me, it was a confession. A whisper in plain sight. I didn't cry. I wanted to. But tears felt like a privilege I couldn't afford anymore. Instead, I let my breath slow until every inhale sounded like a promise. I wasn't sure what kind yet, revenge, maybe. Or truth. Or both. A waiter appeared with a tray of champagne. "Ma'am? You all right?" he asked softly. His kindness almost broke me. Almost. "Fine," I said. "Just needed air." He nodded and disappeared, leaving the scent of citrus and alcohol behind him. Through the glass, Mark caught my eye, just for a second. His smile faltered. He knew something was off. He started toward me, but Lila grabbed his arm, said something in his ear, and he stopped. He looked back at her the way men do when they've already chosen. That's when I realized he wasn't just unfaithful, he was comfortable with it. I looked down at the diamond bracelet on my wrist, his last anniversary gift. He'd said, "You deserve something timeless." I wondered then if he meant the jewelry or the betrayal. I unclasped it quietly, felt its weight fall into my palm, and dropped it into the half-empty flute of champagne on the railing. The sound it made was small, almost polite, like closure pretending to be an accident. Behind me, the glass doors slid open. His voice came, low, practiced. "Clara?" I didn't turn. "Enjoying yourself?" I asked, keeping my tone light. He hesitated. "You disappeared." "I tend to do that," I said. "When things get crowded." He stepped closer. I could smell his cologne, warm and familiar, now sickly sweet. "You okay?" I finally turned. "Am I?" I tilted my head, studying him. "You tell me." He frowned, confused, calculating how much I'd seen. I watched the way his throat tightened when he realized I wasn't going to make it easy. "You're overthinking again," he said gently, the same tone he used whenever he wanted me to back down. "I used to," I whispered. "Not tonight." His jaw shifted, just slightly. That small betrayal of confidence told me everything. He reached out, brushing my arm, and I stepped back. "Go inside, Mark," I said quietly. "The night's not over yet." He opened his mouth to argue, but something in my eyes must have warned him. He left without another word. When the doors closed, I turned back to the city. The wind picked up, catching the hem of my dress and the faint echo of violins from inside. I closed my eyes and made myself a silent promise. I wouldn't break. I'd build. And when the truth finally walked into the light, I'd be standing there, calm, ready, because the best part wasn't the betrayal. It was what came after. When I walked back into the ballroom, the music had changed, slower, silkier, the kind that makes people lean closer than they should. The chandelier light washed everyone in a honey glow, and yet all I could see was her. Lila. My sister. She stood near the grand piano, her hand tracing the rim of a champagne flute, the soft curve of her mouth tilted in a smile that looked effortless, and utterly false. The sight of her in that emerald dress almost made me forget everything I knew. Almost. Because I remembered the first time I lent her a dress like that. She was 16, nervous before her high school dance, and I told her that confidence could look like silk if you wore it right. Now here she was, draped in my advice, using it like a weapon. The crowd parted slightly as she laughed, that familiar, lilting laugh that always made people turn. Mark stood a step behind her, nodding at someone's comment, his hand casually resting on her shoulder. That touch again. Casual for the room, intimate for the trained eye. My eye. The sting wasn't just betrayal, it was recognition. I had seen this version of him before, the man who thrived on admiration, who built his charm like a mirror and let women mistake reflection for warmth. But I had never imagined that mirror turning toward my own blood. The jazz band shifted into something upbeat, and waiters glided through the crowd with trays of gold-rimmed glasses. I watched as Mark leaned toward Lila, whispering something that made her blush. The lights caught the diamond at her neck, my gift, last Christmas. A piece I'd picked because she'd said, "It's too much, Clara." I'd insisted. Family deserves to shine too. My chest tightened. Not from jealousy, from understanding. Some people only take what you give them because they've already planned what to steal next. I started walking toward them before I knew I'd moved. My heels clicked against the marble, soft but steady. Mark saw me first. I watched his expression fold inward, guilt, calculation, a hint of panic. Lila turned, her smile faltering when she met my eyes. The silence between us was a whole history condensed into one look. "Clara," she said too brightly, holding her arms out. "I was just telling Mark how perfect everything looks tonight." "I bet you were," I said evenly. Her eyes darted away, just for a second, toward him. That was all it took. The truth doesn't need words, just one glance, one shared guilt. Mark cleared his throat. "The decorations are beautiful," I finished for him. "Yes. I picked them." Lila shifted uncomfortably, her hands tightening around her glass. "You always had an eye for detail," she murmured. I stepped closer, the scent of her perfume, familiar and foreign all at once, filling the small space between us. "So do you," I said softly. "You noticed the man everyone else should have ignored." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes shimmered, not with shame, but fear, the kind you feel when you realize the person you underestimated has been awake all along. The band paused. Someone clinked a glass for a toast. The noise broke the moment. I stepped back, adjusted the strap of my dress, and smiled the way my mother used to when she wanted people to think everything was fine. "Don't worry," I whispered to her. "The best part's still coming." She swallowed hard. I didn't need to say anything else. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, his cheerful voice slicing through the unease still clinging to my skin. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? It's time for our annual toast to generosity and family." Family. The word echoed like a cracked bell. I caught Lila's eyes for half a second, she looked away first. Mark pretended to laugh at something a colleague said, but his hand trembled as he reached for his drink. The room gathered around the stage, sequined dresses, polished shoes, all those polite faces glowing in the chandelier's warmth. But underneath the music and the perfume, there was the quiet hum of secrets. I could feel it. I could smell it. I hadn't planned to make a scene. That was never my way. But betrayal has a rhythm of its own, one that builds and builds until silence feels heavier than truth. The host turned toward me. "Clara, would you like to say a few words? After all, tonight's gala wouldn't exist without your work." My stomach turned, but I smiled, that calm, careful smile that hides entire storms behind it. "Of course," I said, handing my clutch to the nearest server. As I stepped onto the small stage, the world seemed to slow. The click of my heels echoed louder than the music. Mark froze mid-sip. Lila's lips parted slightly, as if to call me back, but she didn't. She couldn't. The microphone was cold against my fingers. I looked out at the sea of faces, all of them strangers to the truth, at least for a few more minutes. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady. I wasn't planning to speak tonight. But I suppose some moments demand a voice. A polite laugh rippled through the audience. Mark's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "I'd like to make a toast," I continued. "To loyalty, that rare, invisible thread that holds us together even when the world tries to tear us apart." Someone clapped. Lila smiled weakly, her hand shaking as she adjusted her necklace. I went on. And to honesty. The kind that doesn't always arrive on time, but always shows up eventually. Sometimes in whispers, sometimes in photographs. A quiet shift moved through the room, the collective intake of breath before understanding sets in. I looked straight at Mark. He looked away. Lila's face had gone pale, her eyes wide and glassy. The air around her shimmered with tension, and for the first time that night, she looked like she wanted to disappear. I lifted my glass. To family, I said softly. May we always know who truly stands beside us, and who just stands close enough to watch us fall. The silence that followed was electric. Then, slowly, people began to raise their glasses, confused, hesitant, but compelled. The sound of crystal touching crystal filled the hall like distant thunder. I took a small sip, then set my glass down. My heart was steady, my breath slow. I didn't need to say more. The truth was already alive in the room, whispering its own confession through every stolen glance and frozen smile. From the corner of my eye, I saw my sister turn and slip out toward the balcony, her steps small and hurried. Mark stayed where he was, rooted by guilt or fear, I couldn't tell which. The host rushed forward, laughing awkwardly. Well. Thank you, Clara, for those powerful words. I stepped down from the stage, the sound of applause breaking like glass behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I knew the storm had just been invited in, and I was done pretending not to hear the thunder. The music had returned, but the laughter never did. The air inside the ballroom grew heavy, like the chandelier lights were dimming under the weight of every unspoken word. I could feel their eyes on me, some curious, some pitying, most pretending nothing had happened. But my focus wasn't on them. I saw the faint movement of a silver dress disappearing through the tall glass doors leading out to the balcony. Lila. I followed quietly, heels soft against the carpet, my pulse sinking with the slow thrum of the jazz band inside. The door closed behind me with a hush, muting the sound of false smiles and clinking glasses. Outside, the night felt colder than it should have. The city below shimmered, cars, street lamps, and small lives moving on, unaware that someone's world had just begun to tilt. Lila was leaning against the railing, shoulders trembling slightly. The wind lifted strands of her hair, and for a second she looked like the sister I used to share secrets with, before everything got complicated. Before she crossed the line. She turned when she heard my footsteps, her eyes red, mascara smudged at the corners. Clara, she whispered. Please. It's not what you think. I almost laughed. The sentence every guilty person rehearses in their head. Then tell me, I said softly. Tell me what I think. She swallowed hard, her voice small. It just happened. We were drunk that night after the fundraiser. He said you two were drifting apart. I didn't mean. Don't, I interrupted. Don't make him your excuse. You knew. Tears slid down her cheek. You don't understand, I've always envied you, the way people look at you, the way he looked at you. I just wanted to feel that, even once. That was the first honest thing she'd said all night. The silence between us stretched, long and unkind. The cold wind slipped between us like a ghost. I thought you loved me, I said. I do, she choked out. Then why'd you take what was mine? She didn't answer. Her hands gripped the railing so tightly her knuckles went white. Somewhere inside, the band began playing again, a soft, melancholy tune that sounded too fitting. After a while, I stepped closer. Do you know what hurt the most? I asked quietly. It wasn't losing him. It was realizing how easy it was for you to help him lie to me. She closed her eyes, shoulders shaking. I can't fix this. No, I said, my voice steady. You can't. But you can stop pretending it was love. That's the least you owe me. She nodded, wordless, broken in that small, desperate way people get when the truth finally stops forgiving them. I turned to go, but her voice stopped me. Are you going to tell Mom? I paused, my hand resting on the glass door handle. I don't need to, I said. You just did. She looked confused, then followed my gaze, and froze. Through the reflection in the glass, she saw the open doorway and the small crowd just inside, watching. People had drifted toward the balcony after my toast, maybe curious, maybe suspicious. They'd heard enough. Her breath caught. Clara. I opened the door and stepped back into the golden light. The best part's coming, I said softly. You should go fix your face before it arrives. Inside, the air was electric again, the way it gets right before lightning hits. I could feel it. The night had only started to confess. The night didn't end on the balcony. Nights like that never end, they just sink deeper into silence, heavy and unspoken. By the time I came back inside, the air was strange again, too quiet for celebration, too fragile to repair. People stood in small clusters, whispering behind their glasses, pretending to discuss the music or the menu. Mark wasn't at the bar anymore. His absence had a shape, like a missing shadow. I knew where he'd gone, his pattern was always the same. When caught, he retreated. When cornered, he hid. But I wasn't chasing him this time. Still, I found myself walking toward the hallway behind the ballroom, past the tall mirrors and the waiting staff pretending not to notice the tension pulsing through the air. The door to the lounge was slightly ajar. Inside, I heard the faint buzz of a phone vibrating on a table. He was there, head down, sleeves rolled up, staring at the screen like it held the answer to a prayer. For a moment, I didn't speak. I wanted to see him the way strangers might, handsome, successful, controlled. A man who could charm an entire room and lie to every face inside it without blinking. Then he looked up. And for the first time, I saw it as fear. Not regret, not shame. Fear. Clara, he said, voice low, too calm. Whatever you think you saw. Stop, I whispered. I'm done thinking. I know. He sighed, rubbed his face. You shouldn't have embarrassed yourself out there. That made me laugh. The sound startled both of us. Embarrassed myself? I said. You kissed my sister at our anniversary gala. His jaw tightened. It was a mistake. Right, I said softly. Which time? He looked down again, scrolling his phone, maybe searching for evidence that could save him. But then he froze. I saw his thumb hover over the screen, the way his eyes flickered, and I knew. Show me, I said. He hesitated. It's nothing. I took a step closer, voice cold. Then you won't mind. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, with a strange resignation, he handed me the phone. One photo was open, not scandalous at first glance. Just a woman's reflection caught in a mirror. But not just any mirror, my dressing table. My own house. Lila, in my home. Wearing my robe. Her smile small, almost taunting. The date stamp said last week. My hands didn't shake. They should have. My body just went quiet, like it was conserving power for whatever came next. Mark exhaled, guilt breaking through the mask. It was before we decided to try again, he said weakly. We never decided to try again, I said. I just stopped talking. He looked up at me, voice almost pleading. Clara, I made a mistake. I love you. I stared at him for a long time, the phone still glowing between us. No, I said softly. You love control. You love being forgiven. The air felt colder, sharper. I set the phone down on the table and leaned close enough for him to hear the quiet in my voice. You know what the cruelest part of betrayal is? I whispered. It doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people who said they'd never lie. He didn't answer. He couldn't. I straightened, smoothed my dress, and took one last look at him, the man who thought my silence was weakness. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I said. "You'll want to remember what peace looks like." It's about to leave the room. Then I walked out, leaving the phone unlocked on the table, the photograph still shining in the dim light. Behind me, the sound of the band drifted faintly through the hallway, "The way you look tonight." I almost smiled. It figured. When I got home that night, the world outside the car window looked too still to be real, like someone had pressed pause on everything that once made sense. The porch light was still on, glowing faintly against the fog, and for a split second, I thought about driving past the house altogether. But peace doesn't come from running, it comes from walking through the fire, step by step. Inside, the air was thick with silence. My heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor, the sound too loud in the empty hallway. On the console table sat a bouquet of lilies, Mark's favorite kind, not mine. A note was tucked beneath them, "For you, to start again." The handwriting was his. So neat. So confident. So wrong. I carried the flowers to the kitchen and dropped them, still wrapped, into the trash. Then I went upstairs. Our bedroom looked exactly as it always did, perfectly arranged, perfectly cold. But there was something new on the bed. A small box. Silver ribbon. A card that said simply, "For Clara." I stood there for a long moment before opening it. The paper tore easily, too easily, like it had been waiting for my hands. Inside, under a layer of white tissue, was a gold bracelet. I remembered it instantly. It was the one I'd admired months ago in the boutique downtown, the one he'd said was too expensive right now. My chest tightened. The price tag was still attached. And there, printed clearly, was the date of purchase. Last Tuesday. The same day as the photograph. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the box in my lap, and stared at the ceiling. The house creaked around me, settling into its midnight rhythm. My mind wasn't racing anymore, it was still, deadly still. That's when I noticed something else, the faint smell of my perfume, but heavier, sweeter. Not mine exactly. Clothes. I looked around and saw it, my bottle of a velvet orchid perfume, half empty, sitting on his nightstand. The cap wasn't even screwed on. It hit me like a slow wave, she'd been here. In this room. Wearing my scent. Sleeping on these sheets. I didn't cry. Not even once. My mother used to say that tears are for the first heartbreak. Everyone after that just teaches you how to breathe underwater. I stood, opened the window, and let the cold night air wash over me. The bracelet gleamed faintly in the moonlight, mocking me. I turned it over in my hand. There was an engraving on the inside, "Always, M." I almost laughed. Always what? Always lying? Always pretending? Always leaving me to clean the ashes of his mess? I placed the bracelet back in the box, tied the ribbon neatly, and set it on his pillow. Then I picked up my phone, opened the voice recorder, and whispered the truth for the first time. "He gave me a bracelet to buy forgiveness," I said softly. "But I don't trade peace for gold anymore." The words hung in the air like smoke, curling through the shadows. Before turning off the light, I caught my reflection in the mirror, the same woman, same eyes, but quieter now. Not broken, just emptying out what didn't belong to her anymore. I took a deep breath and whispered to the empty room, "The best part's coming." Then I slipped under the sheets, not to sleep, but to wait for morning, the kind of morning that burns clean through every lie. The first light of morning crawled across the curtains like it was afraid to enter. The house smelled of lilies and cold coffee, the leftovers of what used to be a life. I didn't sleep. I just waited, still in the dress from the night before, tracing the edge of the bracelet box with my fingertips. At 6:27 a.m., the phone rang. Not my cell, the old landline. The one that hardly ever rang anymore except for telemarketers or wrong numbers. But that morning, it felt deliberate, the kind of call that carries weight before anyone even speaks. I answered on the second ring. Clara? The voice was low, uncertain. Lila. For a second, the air in my chest froze solid. You have a lot of nerve, I said quietly. I didn't call to argue, she said. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else. Hear what? There was silence, thick and uneasy. Then, Mark's gone. I blinked, disoriented. Gone where? She hesitated. He packed his things last night. Said he needed space. I thought you should know. My laugh came out hollow. That's what he told you? I'm not defending him, she whispered. I just thought you'd want. I don't, I cut her off. You've already given me enough. There was a long pause. I could almost hear her breathing on the other end, shaky and unsure. He said you wouldn't understand, she murmured finally. That broke something inside me, not from pain, but from disbelief. Understand what? I asked, voice low. That he lied to me? Or that he used you to make his lies look smaller? Clara, please, she said softly. I didn't mean for any of this. Of course you didn't, I whispered. No one ever does. I hung up. For a moment, the silence was deafening. I looked down at my hands, steady now, too steady, and realized I wasn't shaking anymore. Whatever storm had been raging inside me had burned itself out. The phone rang again. This time, I didn't pick up. Instead, I turned off the ringer and walked to the kitchen. The morning light was cruelly honest. It painted everything too clearly, the fingerprints on the fridge, the lipstick stain on a mug that wasn't mine, the faint trail of dust where his shoes used to line up. Proof of a life I no longer wanted to defend. I poured coffee, black, no sugar. My reflection in the window didn't look like someone whose world had just split open. It looked like someone who had survived the impact and was deciding what to build next. On the counter, my phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. Unknown, you'll regret this, Clara. I stared at it for a long time before replying. Me, you already do. Then I blocked the number. The act was so simple, so ordinary, but it felt like the first step toward breathing again. That morning, I opened every window in the house. The air that rushed in was cold and sharp and honest. I gathered the sheets, the perfume bottle, the flowers, everything that still smelled like him, and dropped them into a black trash bag. The bracelet went last, its gold glinting one final time before disappearing into the dark. I dragged the bag to the curb and stood there barefoot, the street quiet, the world still deciding whether to wake. And in that stillness, I realized something. Sometimes freedom doesn't arrive with fireworks or applause. Sometimes it slips in quietly, disguised as a morning that doesn't hurt to look at. The house was silent again by afternoon. That kind of silence that presses against your skin, waiting for something to break it. I'd spent the morning cleaning, not out of routine but necessity. When you strip away a life, the dust left behind needs somewhere to go. I'd emptied drawers, boxed his cufflinks, folded the suits he'd left behind. Each sound felt distant, the soft thud of fabric, the whisper of tape sealing cardboard. I didn't know if I was grieving or shedding. Maybe both. Around noon, I found it, tucked inside the drawer of his nightstand. A small black USB drive. No label. Just a faint scratch across its surface, like it had been pulled out in a hurry. Something in me knew before I even plugged it in. It hummed with secrets. I sat down at my desk, turned on my laptop, and watched the file load. The title popped up, Tuesday_recording.mp4. The timestamp froze my breath, the same day as the bracelet. For a moment, I thought about closing it. Pretending ignorance. But truth doesn't care for comfort. It waits, patient and sharp. So I clicked. The screen flickered to life. A recording. His office. The desk lamp glowed low. And then, his voice. Mark. He wasn't talking to Lila this time. He was talking to someone else, a man's voice I couldn't place. She's smarter than she lets on, Mark said. I think she suspects something. Then why not end it, the other voice asked. Because she has the accounts, Mark muttered. And if I leave now, she'll freeze everything. I need time to move things around first. I felt my pulse spike. Money. He wasn't just cheating. He was planning to drain our savings. The video went on for 5 minutes, logistics, bank transfers, lies arranged neatly like a strategy. When it ended, the camera caught him leaning back in his chair, smirking. By the time she realizes what happened, I'll already be gone. I sat there for a long moment, unable to move. My throat felt raw. That was when I heard it, a soft creak from the hallway. Someone outside the door. I turned slowly. It was my mother. She stood there, a dish towel still in her hands. She'd come by unannounced, as she often did when she felt something was wrong. Her eyes moved from the screen to my face. Sweetheart, she said gently, what did he do? I couldn't answer. Instead, I played the video again. She stood beside me, silent. When it ended, she placed a hand on my shoulder, firm and steady. You know what this means, don't you? She asked quietly. I nodded. Her expression softened. Then don't fight him with anger. Fight him with grace. It's slower, but it cuts deeper. I looked at her, searching for strength in the lines of her face. She'd lived her own share of heartbreak and still carried herself like peace wasn't something that could be taken. I think I'm done fighting, I whispered. Then you're finally ready, she said. That night, I made copies of the file. 3 of them. One went to my lawyer. One to a friend who owed me silence. And one, I kept. Not for revenge, for truth. As the printer hummed, I noticed the last light of the day fading against the window. The same sun that had witnessed my humiliation was now watching my rebirth. I pressed play once more, not to listen, but to memorize the sound of the end. And for the first time since the gala, I smiled. Not out of victory. Out of certainty. He thought I'd stay quiet. He thought silence was surrender. He was about to learn its strategy. Evening came draped in gold, too calm for what it was about to witness. The house smelled like rosemary and slow-cooked chicken, a deliberate choice. Peaceful, domestic, familiar. I wanted the night to start the way all ordinary evenings start, so he wouldn't see the ending coming. Mark called before pulling into the driveway. His voice was flat, cautious. We need to talk, he said. We do, I replied. Come hungry. When he arrived, he looked tired, not guilty, not angry, just drained. The kind of exhaustion that comes from running out of lies. His tie was loosened, his eyes ringed with red. He hesitated in the doorway like a man visiting a memory. You cooked, he said. Of course, I answered, pouring wine. It's a celebration. For what? For endings that don't look like endings yet. He blinked. Clara, if this is about. It's about dinner, I cut in softly. Sit. He did. The table was set beautifully, linen napkins, white candles, the good plates we only used on anniversaries. I'd opened the windows so the evening air could slip through, bringing with it the faint sound of crickets and the smell of rain. For a few minutes, we ate in silence. The clinking of silverware filled the spaces where our voices used to live. Then he reached for the wine again, trying to break the tension. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said finally. Things just got complicated. I smiled. Complicated, I repeated, as if tasting the word. That's what you call betrayal now? He sighed. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I said, leaning back. He hesitated, searching for a version of the truth that could still make him the victim. I was under pressure, he began. Work's been a mess, Anne. I raised a hand. Stop. My voice was calm, even. I've already heard your confession. He frowned. What are you talking about? I turned my phone toward him. Pressed play. His own voice filled the room, clear, undeniable. She has the accounts. If I leave now, she'll freeze everything. I need time to move things around first. Mark's fork clattered against his plate. His face went white. Where did you get that? Let's just say truth has a way of leaving breadcrumbs, I said. He reached for the phone, but I pulled it back. Relax, I said gently. You always tell me to stay calm. I am. He stared at me, chest rising and falling faster now. You think you can ruin me with that? No, I said. You already did that yourself. I'm just letting the light in. We sat in silence again, the sound of the recording still echoing faintly between us. Then I reached under the table and pulled out a sealed envelope. I slid it toward him. What's this? He asked. Freedom, I said simply. The divorce agreement. You'll sign it tonight. His eyes narrowed. Or what? Or the file doesn't stay private. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. You're bluffing. Mark, I said softly, you know me better than that. He stared at me, something flickering in his eyes, not anger, not fear, but respect. The kind you give to an opponent who just played the move you never saw coming. After a long pause, he picked up the pen. His hand trembled as he signed. When he was done, I poured him another glass of wine and raised my own. To honesty, I said. He didn't toast back. After he left, I stood at the doorway, watching his car disappear into the dark. The rain began softly, tapping against the porch light. I exhaled slowly, the way you do after holding your breath for too many years. The house was quiet again, but this time, the silence was mine. The storm came at dawn. Not the loud kind that shakes the windows, but the soft, steady rain that erases everything it touches. By the time I woke, the house was washed clean. No scent of wine, no trace of him, just the faint perfume of wet earth and a silence that hummed like peace. I walked through every room one last time. The kitchen still held echoes of last night's dinner, the faint shimmer of candle wax on the table. His chair was slightly pushed back, just as he'd left it. The papers, signed, dated, final, lay beneath my hand like the weight of an ending that finally made sense. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. On the counter sat my phone, still recording from the night before. I pressed stop. The screen blinked, saving the file. The last words captured were mine, to honesty. It felt fitting. I made coffee, black, no sugar, and watched the rain slide down the glass. Every drop felt like punctuation. Every breath like a sentence finished. When the kettle whistled, I smiled to myself. Even the house seemed lighter. By 9, I was dressed. Simple jeans, a gray sweater, my mother's old raincoat. In my hand, a small envelope, my final letter to Mark. I didn't write it for him to understand, I wrote it so he'd never forget. The drive to his office was short. The parking lot shimmered under the drizzle, half empty, half awake. I walked past the receptionist who looked up, startled, as if recognizing something different in me. I smiled politely. Could you make sure Mr. Wallace gets this? I said, placing the envelope on her desk. She nodded, her curiosity plain. I didn't explain. Some messages are better when they arrive quietly. Back in the car, I waited for a moment, engine off, watching people come and go beneath umbrellas. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. It was strange, the stillness of letting go. At exactly 10, my phone buzzed. A message from my lawyer. Delivered. Filed. Effective immediately. 3 sentences. That's all it took to close 32 chapters of a shared life. I drove to my mother's house afterward. She was in the garden, as always, pruning roses that had bloomed too early for spring. When she saw me, she didn't ask a thing. She just opened her arms. We sat on the porch with tea and said nothing for a while. The rain softened to mist, the kind that blurs edges but not truth. Finally, she spoke. "You did what you had to do?" I nodded. "And more." Her smile was small, proud, and sad all at once. "Then it's done." "Not yet," I said. "There's one more thing." That afternoon, I went back to the lake where Mark and I had once promised each other forever. The water was calm, the kind of gray that swallows reflection. I took the small USB drive from my pocket, the one that had started everything, and held it in my palm for a long moment. It felt lighter than I remembered. "Goodbye," I whispered, and dropped it into the water. It sank without a sound. For a while, I stood there, watching the ripples fade, until all that was left was quiet. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out something else, the bracelet. The one that said always, M. I smiled faintly. "Not always," I murmured, and let that go too. The wind picked up, scattering droplets against my face, cool and clean. By evening, I was home again, packing what little I wanted to keep. As I sealed the last box, the sun broke through the clouds, a thin, golden line cutting across the floorboards. I whispered to the empty room, that was the best part. Because it was. Not revenge, not exposure, but the peace that follows truth. I closed the door gently behind me and didn't look back.